Hello, my name is Logan Hartman. I am presenting the ethics presentation for Team 29, and our presentation discusses the ethics of gift giving. What is gift giving? In order to define this, let's discuss a hypothetical scenario that comes from an article written by the Department of Philosophy and Department of Mechanical Engineering from Texas A&M University. In the article, they define Tom, a chemical engineer who is in charge of overseeing the design of a new pump at a chemical factory. Tom argues for a new type of valve to be used in the pump because it is safer and cheaper than existing pumps. These pumps and valves are approved and are used in the new design. After the design has been manufactured, a salesman from the company that made the pumps and valves comes to Tom and offers him an invitation to go on this exotic, expensive fishing trip as kind of a way to say thank you for purchasing the pumps. Tom and the salesman have no prior relationship to each other. Should Tom accept this invite? It may seem harmless at first, but if we look closer and analyze the situation, we find that it violates certain codes of ethics within the NSPE Code of Ethics for Engineers. These fundamentally are broken, if Tom accepts it, are broken in Fundamental Canons 1 and 6, which describe that engineers shall hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public and conduct themselves honorably, responsibly, ethically, lawfully, as so to enhance the honor, reputation, and usefulness of the profession. These fundamental canons will be broken by accepting this invitation, which is clearly a gift-giving scenario or a bribe. Furthermore, there are specific canons in the Code of Ethics that go against bribes and gifts. These include canons 4A, 4B, 4C in rules of practice, and 1E and 5B in professional obligations. These can be summarized in the fact that engineers shall not solicit or accept or financial aid or other forms of valuable compensation, directly or indirectly, from outside sources that are not associated with the work for which they do. The article also discusses what is considered ethical behavior and what is not. Now, the situation as a whole is purely hypothetical, but it discusses and implies a lot of moral ambiguity with the situation. There's a lot of underlying complexity with the ethical dilemma. Most situations can fall between two extremes. An action that would cause harm for the public and personal gain is objectively and obviously bad, and a selfless action that would cause benefit for the public is obviously and objectively good. Most situations that people would find in the professional world are going to lie between these two extremes, and they're not clearly defined. At some point, someone has to draw a line in the sand that says, this is ethical behavior and this is not. The method of casuistry can help us define the ethics of the situation, and this was outlined rigorously in the article provided by Texas A&M University. There exists a gradient between the two extremes that creates ambiguity, and in order to become a professional engineer, you must learn to effectively navigate this. Should Tom accept the gift? Team 29 says no. It is Team 29's perspective that Tom should not accept the fishing trip gift. We came to this method by the method of casuistry, analyzing the NSPE Code of Ethics, and reviewing industry and professional precedent. We found it to be morally and ethically impermissible for Tom to accept the gift. Going through these methods at which we came to our decision, the method of casuistry was defined earlier in the previous slide, where you have one objectively good scenario and one objectively bad scenario. These can be ranked from 1 to 10 in terms of ethicality. Once you have these two extremes defined, you can compare the characteristics of these situations to the situation you are trying to apply ethicality to, which would be the fishing trip in this scenario. You would compare these characteristics and rank them depending on how much is similar to the ethical scenario and the non-ethical scenario. Then you could rank in between 1 and 10 with hypothetical other scenarios that change certain variables within the situation that you are trying to analyze, and try and find a middle ground of where this situation would land. Once you have your 1 through 10 kind of analyzed, you can go off each individual one and be like, this is ethical or this is not. And then you can more easily rank where your situation you're trying to analyze fits, and it can aid you in trying to understand whether this is ethical behavior or unethical behavior. Secondly, we analyze the National Society of Professional Engineers Code of Ethics for Engineers. As discussed previously, several canons were violated by accepting the gift, including the fact that by accepting the gift, Tom would not be upholding the safety of the public or respecting the profession of engineers and holding up the integrity of that. It may be not clear at first, but by accepting the gift, Tom sets a precedent for gift giving and bribing to occur more in the industry. Once this precedent is set, it can be exploited by those who have more access to economic resources, thus outcompeting smaller companies and smaller businesses that are not able to provide the same bribes and gifts to engineers and other contractors. Ultimately, this leads to a bad circle of negative reinforcement where engineers have to be bribed and solicited in order to purchase certain equipment, and companies are not able to get their products sold unless they bribe or solicit engineers. The fundamental canons are also added onto with a couple rules of practice and professional obligations that have been broken, as discussed earlier, 4A, 4B, 4C, 1E, and 5B. And within those, they specifically discuss how engineers should not accept bribes or operate outside of accept bribes or compensation from people who are they not directly working with that might conflict their interests in this scenario. Lastly, we reviewed industry and professional precedent on the matter. Within the article provided by Texas A&M University, they set out many rules that have been defined by several companies, such as Texas Instruments, General Motors, and several other large engineering firms. Within these rules and regulations, there are very, very specific regulations against bribes and gift giving, and very specific amounts of money that are capable of being accepted as simply business expenditures or networking, and they try to define the line between what is morally acceptable and ethically acceptable for business interaction. Most of the time, what you see is that lower priced compensation, such as going out for lunch with a business associate or going to golf to discuss a new business plan, are normally ethically and business practical, whereas an extravagant fishing trip would be a morally impermissible act because it would set a moral precedent that is not beneficial for engineers or companies. These are the three reasons that we have decided to say that it is morally and ethically impermissible for Tom to accept the gift, and that doing so would violate many codes of ethics set out for engineers. Thank you.